and as a parent, how can you sit there and have your child telling you these things and then have the person even admit it to another adult who's supposed to be protecting you, and they do nothing about it? That's the part I can't really wrap my brain around that. Like, what kind of a parent are you? Do you even deserve the title of a parent? The last dentist that I went to was an Amish man who injected cow Novocaine into my mouth to pull out my wisdom teeth. And they did get me dentures, but basically after, it just... First off, who does this? Who does this? It was in his living room. He has a chair that you sit in. You sit in a chair. He takes this big old needle, injects this Novocaine. Nothing was numb. I felt everything come out.
It's a thing of horror movies, it really is.
And this is how Amish people sometimes operate.
Literally operate.
Yeah. And so I find Pennsylvania Dutch to be a very oppressive language, but also it's important that people know how to speak it, because if we can help any of these children who are having these issues, like, it's important to have interpreters and translators for them. Through all of that, I found a way to make connections with other people outside of the community. So if you can, make connections with people outside of the community. Just because the community believes that they're bad people or they're of the world and they're sinners doesn't actually mean that they are. There are some really wonderful people who will help you. You're not alone. You're not the only one. And you can find help, and there is a way out.
Okay, I am recording. So, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today I have Mary with me, and she is my first anything other than Jehovah's Witness on my channel. She is ex-Amish, and she has previously given her story on Emma's channel, so we're not going to be getting into that today. But what we are going to do is we're going to be talking about what she's doing after her leaving the Amish, what she's doing now, and her life and her direction going forward from here. So welcome to the channel, Mary. Let's go ahead and get started on talking about tattoos and therapy and all this good stuff.
All this good stuff. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Byler. I was born and raised Amish. I grew up in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And in 2004, I left the community. I reported the abuse. There were 5 people arrested. And today, I still have long-lasting effects from that. For example, like, my child is shunned by my biological family, even though my child has never had anything to do with them or ever been involved with any of the abuse awareness work that I do. One of my goals is to create educational content talking about the barriers, because we grew up speaking Pennsylvania Dutch first, and then we learned to speak English when we went to school. And then later on, I also learned how to speak Hochdeutsch.
Now, so can I ask you one real quick question on that? When you say you went to school, was it an actual public school you went to, or was it an Amish school?
It was an Amish school. I had an 8th grade education when I became nonconforming in 2004. I was 19 years old. I actually ended up going to the local community college and applying for assistance and receiving some assistance to get a GED. So I was talking about how I had to go get a GED. I had to pay for that because I was too old to go to high school. The other problem is there's a lot of, for example, when I walked away, I didn't exist on paper. I didn't have a birth certificate. I didn't have a social security number. I had to go through this whole process to even get a copy of my birth certificate so I could apply for a social security number.
Yeah, I remember listening about that on your interview with
Right.
Emma, and I was thinking, how did you prove? Because you said you had to prove that you were
Yes.
born in the
I had to
United
get
States.
I had to get like letters written for me, like all kinds of stuff. It's like a crazy hoop
So
of
did you actually have to get letters written from like like not former, but like current Amish members of your
no.
community?
They did not communicate with me at that point. It was people who had known me before when I was still in the community and trying to conform.
Okay.
Just to be clear, I made a very bad Amish person.
See, and
Like,
I was on the opposite end of the spectrum with the JWs because I was a very good JW until my early 20s.
no, I was never a good Amish person, ever.
You
Um,
said you knew that you were LGBTQ before when you were growing up, didn't you?
right.
And of course, being Pride Month, I had to, put the background up for Pride Month because
Thank
we're
you.
recording this during June of 2021. So,
Look, say it again. 2021.
damn right.
That's it. But no, I knew it just was like one of those things where Amish view homosexuality as a sexual perversion and a sin. And so therefore, like there's something wrong with you and there's no hope for your soul and just that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, the
Not
Jehovah's
cool.
Witnesses are pretty much the same way when it comes to that. So,
Well, and ironically, like basically I was 5 years old and I told my parents I was going to grow up and marry an English woman, and that did not go over so well.
now just to
And
be clear, English means a non-Amish person.
yeah.
Because, and the reason why I want to clarify that is because Jehovah's Witnesses have terms for people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. We call them worldly. So and so and that's just one thing with cults though. They have terms that
Yep.
mean completely other things to them, but when you use those terms in the real world, they're like, English? Oh, you mean
What
somebody
are
from
you
UK?
talking about? Yeah, like what are you talking about?
And then
And
worldly means a person who's well traveled of the world, not
yeah.
so.
Yeah. So that actually started like after that is when I remember the child sexual assault starting, and that went on for a very long time, over a decade. It was horrible. But basically, I'm not in that place anymore, and I'm kind of working to raise awareness, and like we were talking about,
Mhm.
trying to bridge the gap between the two cultures. And one, because I've heard so many people talking about, and there's one that's very public that I can talk about here, is when they go try to report crimes that are committed by Amish people, what happens? And what often happens is that they try to report, and then it's been shifting to where it's not so much anymore, but there's still places where an Amish person who is a victim of a crime may go try to report the crime, and
Mhm.
they will legitimately say that person is Amish. Like, you would never do that,
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah.
that kind of response. That needs to stop.
Yes, it does.
And that's
Because it's been proven time and again, it doesn't matter what background you're from, what religion you're from. People do bad things no matter where you're from.
Well, and when you get a group of people, you can't just elevate them to this utopian status where they can do no wrong. You have to
Exactly.
understand that people are people. And when you get a group of people, some people are bad. And I'm not by any means saying that all Amish people are bad. What I am saying is they are people,
Right. Exactly.
and some people do bad things.
Exactly. And that's one thing I always try to convey when I do any videos about, the Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't ever want to say that all the Jehovah's Witnesses are bad people. They're not. But there are people in their ranks that just do bad things.
Yep.
And that's the bottom line with any organization on this earth. You have
Yep.
a lot of good people, but you still have those few bad apples that like to screw it up for everybody else.
And that's just a fact.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like it's really been interesting. The more I know about like Jehovah's Witnesses, the more I feel like it's really parallel. Like, there's a lot of parallels as far as like you were talking about double speak,
Mm-hmm.
which is where the word means something else because you're part of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come out of that and you say that, people don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
They have
And
no idea.
and that's why it's important whenever somebody does a video like this, and even more important because like I'm ex Jehovah Witness and you're ex Amish, that when we say a term like that, we might think of it as no big deal and want to just blow on, but we need to really make sure we stop and explain those terms for anybody who's watching these videos outside of those bubbles, that they understand what we really mean when we say certain things like that.
Mhm. And that goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that I have encountered that are willing to take the time to explain their doublespeak that I've really been able to understand like where the parallels are.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But anyway, so we aim to like bridge the cultural gap, the educational gap, kind of. There's no sex education inside of Amish communities that I have found. I know that they're now doing an Amish abuse awareness conference, like they'll do those. They started about a committee of men in Indiana, started this Amish abuse awareness conferences, and they travel around to different communities. Um, I personally attended one of those meetings. I don't think it's helpful. I commend them for making the effort, but I don't think it's helpful.
So what it sounds like to me, because we talked a little bit about it off air, is that it's more of a show to the outside world that they're taking steps to try to do something when there's not any real change being made inside their ranks.
Correct. And the message, like after I left the meeting, like the question was this supposed to prevent abuse or promote abuse?
Right.
And then like not having, they had one speaker that was qualified. They gave a local police detective 15 minutes on the floor. That speaker was qualified to speak, and especially on the topic that they spoke about. Um, the rest of them, they have an eighth grade education. I
So
I just don't see where they're qualified to speak about abuse awareness, and especially when they're promoting. They had two tables full of literature to include, like To Train Up a Child by Michael and Debbie Pearl. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but it's very much into hitting babies and spare the rod, spoil the child, that
and
type
so
of.
those are written by the Amish.
Michael and Debbie Pearl were not Amish, but
Oh,
they're
okay.
being promoted by the Amish. There
Oh,
are
okay.
books.
See, I didn't
There,
know who they were. That's why I'm
yes,
asking.
there are books that they had available that are definitely written by the Amish, and they're written in English, and they're available for purchase. Some of them don't even have an author listed; they only have a publisher listed.
Mm-hmm.
And just an example, like there's a book titled To a Girl of 11, and one of the excerpts from that book is literally, don't climb up a ladder in front of your brother lest you entice him to sin.
Oh, jeez.
Like,
Yeah, and see that right there is the start of victim blaming. You know,
exactly.
because and see, like I I I try not to divulge too much of my wife's stuff on my videos, but I have said this before. She was abused as a child herself by
Hmm.
her dad's, at the time, best friend, who was an elder in her
Of
congregation.
course.
And when the Jehovah's Witnesses talk about, dress and attire and everything, they'll always tell the women, you got to dress modestly because for lack of a better term, you don't want to dress in a way that's going to entice the men to want to come after you and do these things. Well, how about instead of that, you train the men not to be assholes and get them help if they're having a problem with it, not blame the person who dresses, oh, their top's a little bit too low cut, they're showing a little too much shoulder, or
Right.
their skirt's above their knee like a half an
Right.
inch, and
I just,
it makes no sense. Because here's the bottom line. If you are a sexual predator of any type, the person could be fully clothed head to toe and you can't see anything at all on them, and it's still going to happen. I mean, just look at like the Arab and Muslim companies. Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
I was Amish.
Right. And that's what I'm saying.
Order Amish.
Well, I mean, I went to the Muslim countries because they go a step further with their heads totally covered and only see their eyes. Mm-hmm. And women still get sexually assaulted in those countries.
It has nothing to do with the clothes you're wearing.
Exactly. And that's a very important thing that people need to learn. It's not how you dress. It's going to be the perpetrator's attitude and fault 100% of the time.
So stop asking people, what were you wearing?
Exactly.
Or did you flirt with him with your eyes? Or did you laugh loudly with him? Oh, you had a conversation with him that was friendly.
And stop that. And also stop making children think like they are able to actually consent to adult relationships when they're not.
Children cannot consent.
Period.
I've said this over and over and over. A child cannot consent.
Exactly.
Period. There's not a comma. There's not a question mark. It's a period after that statement.
I'd say it's an exclamation point after that statement, because that needs to be an emphatic point that they cannot consent.
They can't. They really can't.
And I'm a father of 3 children. My oldest is a daughter, and then I have 2 boys. And I remember, and I don't want to get into too much detail about my life here because it's not about me, but I remember when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, and of course I already knew about my wife's abuse and everything at the time and how they mishandled it for her. I remember telling her, this is when I was still fully indoctrinated as a Jehovah's Witness with their mind thinking. I said, if anybody ever touches my daughter, I said, here's what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to go beat the living hell out of whoever touched my kid, and then I'm going to call the police. Period. I wasn't even going to go through my religion to try to get it fixed because I knew they wouldn't fix it.
Well, then they won't, because if they're anything like Amish, as was definitely demonstrated to me, is that they still have the same mindset. One of the things that they put out at this abuse awareness committee that was really infuriating for me is that, the first time it happens, you don't report it to the law yet. They literally said, and I quote, "Mushnet to the logi, sakshnet the laws."
Now, is that Pennsylvania Dutch you just spoke?
Yes. And that translated says, you don't report it to the law.
I actually understood the word law in there.
Yeah.
I believe it or not, I had a year of German in middle school. Okay. And then I actually had somebody in my congregation as a child whose family was Pennsylvania Dutch.
Oh, okay.
And he learned Dutch as he grew older so he could speak to his family. And so there was a lot of similarities between the languages.
But it's not the same.
Well, I know it's not the same, but there were still
similar.
Some words that you could understand and still pick up the context of what they were saying. And so I knew more back then than I do now. Don't try to have a conversation with me now. But I remember we
Oh,
would go play, like basketball and stuff with the other guys in the congregation, and him and I would speak in Dutch to each other so nobody else knew what we were saying.
hey, it served you well
It
in
did.
that moment.
In that moment, it did.
Yeah. But no, like then they said, Avamanus happened wieder and wieder and wieder. So 3 times when it happens over and over and over. It happens 3 times. Then you report it to the law.
What? That's crazy.
That's insanity to me.
Yeah.
That's insanity.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't have. One time is more than enough to report it to the law.
Yes. Thank you.
So, no. Like I said about my daughter,
No.
and my kids just a minute ago, it wouldn't have taken me 2 or 3 times for somebody to have touched them. One time, and I'm beating their ass.
I feel that. I completely understand why you would say that. Because the
And
thing is,
if the police ever asked anything, I'd be like, I had a temporary moment of insanity.
I mean,
I'd win in court too.
I mean, it was a yep, crime
Yeah,
of crime of passion. There you go.
exactly.
Um, but anyways, so when you start talking about why do I think that's valid, I think that's valid because you live with somebody who has the long-term effects of having been a childhood trauma survivor.
Hmm.
And when you survive trauma like that, I can't say as I don't think I'll ever be like completely healed per se.
Oh no.
However, comma pause, I can tell you what some of the long-term effects are like for me. Um, One, hypervigilance is a really big thing, and that's where you're like on edge. You are constantly on edge. Your heart might race. You might have like panic attacks. You might have the feeling of you can't breathe. There might be complete, utter meltdowns, sobbing. You might not even be able to eat. Some people get upset stomachs. Some people just feel the skin crawling on their back or at the back of their neck. Like it can vary widely, but there are some really, really serious long term effects. Another one is for me, don't corner me. Do not corner me. And do not touch me if I don't know that you're going to touch me. Because those two things, the cornering me and touching me without explicit consent, what happens there is you're lucky if I don't respond very, very, very poorly. And if I feel trapped like that and there's nowhere to go and I can't leave, that's not cool
No.
because it puts me right back there.
Now,
And
are you the kind that in that situation, are you going to attack back, or are you going to cower
well,
and be scared?
so one, if you allow me to leave, I have learned the skill to allow me to leave. What happened when I first got out and somebody did that, I straight up punched him. And to be fair, I probably shouldn't have. However, comma pause, you touched my body without consent. I feel like you got exactly what you deserved.
Now, if it's not too personal, you don't have to answer this question, okay? So when you say that person touched you, was it in an inappropriate way, or was it just like a hand on your shoulder or something innocent?
Grab my ass.
Okay, inappropriate, yeah.
Yeah,
Extremely inappropriate.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
no.
No, they got what they deserve then.
Um, and then the other thing that I can tell you about too is like you can go nightmare free for a couple years and then all of a sudden something will happen and you'll start having nightmares again. But anyways, so like nightmares are a big one for me. Like the primary things that I have trouble with is primarily like it's nightmares, triggers that cause me to have almost like really bad reactions like I described when I feel trapped. That's not a good thing. Don't do that to anybody. And most certainly do not grab somebody's ass without consent. Consent is important. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I did is this year I actually, well, January 2020, I started a podcast called The Misfit Amish. Okay. I didn't do much of anything with it until like I made a couple recordings, but in September, well, last summer with COVID going on and everything, there happened to be a case in Missouri of a 13-year-old child that was impregnated by her rapist brothers.
Oh,
And the prosecuting attorney, the theory that I have over this is just the prosecuting attorney advocated for the rapist brothers in court. I am not kidding you.
oh my
His
God.
name was Ben Bergstresser, happened in Seymour, Missouri. They ended up getting probation, which they immediately violated because they probably didn't understand what protection order meant or the restraining order, where they have to stay a certain distance away from the victim, and they didn't. So then they got sent to prison. They're currently in prison. They did try to go back to court this February and get out early, but they were denied that. So they're still in prison. And I made a video that is on YouTube. It's under the Misfit Amish channel. It's called Casting Light on Amish Shadows. Basically talking about the very things that I feel are necessary to bridge the cultural gaps, the educational gaps, and to be more sensitive to Amish survivors, and also understand that we don't have language to describe what's happening to us, and that they should never use currently Amish people to translate for us. That is my personal opinion. I think that it causes more harm than it's worth because of my own story.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm definitely going to be putting a link to your channel in the description at the
Thank
end
you.
of this. And, but I want to ask you, so you made the videos. Now, are you doing anything more than just the podcast, more and YouTube channel as far as your advocacy is concerned?
Well, I've had a few people reach out and need help, and I've been able to find them or point them in the direction of resources local to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right after I made that video, there was another case in Missouri where a 5-year-old child was beaten and drowned to death by 4 adults because, oh my God, she's just like her mother and probably has a demon inside of her, a spirit inside of her, because that's another common belief. It's like there's a spirit making you do this, or Satan's, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So when that happened, that's when I started doing live streams. And part of doing the live streams is creating a space where we can talk about Amish issues without judgment, talking about them in a way that is safe for us, for those of us who came from these communities, and we see the need for these things to be talked about and to be processed, and we have no other place to process them.
Mm-hmm. That's good, because we need, not just we, everybody needs to have that safe space to talk about these issues in the open and to get them exposed to the world. I mean, we might be on, I feel like we're still on the smaller side of a YouTube channel, because I still have less than 1,000 subscribers on my channel. I haven't hit that first 1,000 mark. But then if we can still get these stories out and get the traction, get the awareness that they need, it starts small. Yeah. But if we keep pushing and keep making awareness, it's going to gain traction, and then it's going to be a snowball effect from one YouTube channel to hopefully bigger YouTube channels and to even bigger channels, to where people are now hitting these algorithms on YouTube so much that it's going to start popping up on everybody's news feeds, and they're going to start seeing all this and be aware of it, and we're going to have more advocacy for these victims in these situations.
Yeah, and not just for Amish victims, for all of the victims.
Exactly. And I
Um,
wasn't, I wasn't just meaning Amish. I mean Amish, Jehovah Witness, Scientology, Mormon, everybody.
Everybody. Correct.
Everybody.
Another thing that happened is in April of this year, I actually established an organization to do everything behind. So I now built a website. There's a blog there for people to be able to share their stories. I kind of divided my YouTube channel into different sections. So we have Coffee with Friends, we have the Casting Light on Amish Shadows, and then we have a Disobedient Women section, because that's one of my labels. I
Nice.
fully embrace that. I will show you disobedient.
That's right. That's
I
awesome.
mean, and if that means you're held accountable, well, guess you should have did better.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Another one is I had this brilliant co-host, James Swartz, who is an ex-Amish LGBTQ poet, and we created an entire series that we call Plain Rainbows, and we're talking about the stories of LGBTQ Amish and Anabaptists.
nice.
So,
Now okay, so Anabaptist, is that related to the Amish in some way?
so
'Cause
all
don't know.
Amish are basically disgruntled Catholics in the first place.
Okay.
So they came from the Catholic Church originally. They became Benno Simmons left, him and the group of his followers left the Catholic Church, I believe, because they didn't believe in infant baptism. That was the original thing. They were rebels. And they started the movement, what is formerly known as the Mennonites in the US today.
So you're telling me that the Mennonite movement is technically all a bunch of apostate?
Yes. Yes. And wait until you hear the rest of it.
Sounds
So-
familiar with the Jehovah's Witnesses too.
So Jacob Hammond is the guy, him and a group of his followers didn't agree with the Mennonite movement, and they left that church and they started what's now formally known as the Amish. So again, well, I'm twice apostates here.
Exactly. Well, so Jehovah's Witnesses, same thing. They started off with Charles Taze Russell, okay, and then Charles Taze Russell called his organization the Bible Students, the International Bible Students. And then when Rutherford took over in 1916, he changed a whole bunch of doctrines. And then in the 30s, he changed the name from the Bible Students to the Jehovah's Witnesses. And so there was a whole group of Bible students that didn't agree. They stayed Bible students. And so the Jehovah's Witnesses, for all my Jehovah's Witness listeners that I hope you're here listening, Jehovah's Witnesses are an apostate group from the original group.
Isn't that hilarious? I find it hilarious. That's immensely amusing.
So, yeah.
That's just immensely amusing.
Because really, and I know as far as Jehovah's Witnesses, the current term they use for apostate is, it's basically you're a demon and being controlled by Satan if you're an apostate. But really the dictionary definition of an apostate is just simply somebody who leaves a religious or political affiliation. There's nothing really bad with it. So that also means anybody who converted to Jehovah's Witnesses from any other religion, because that's their goal to get people to convert. And those who do are now apostates from their former religion too.
Yep. And you want to know what's funny is Amish call their they have words for us too. They don't call us apostates. What they call us is abgangene or sie sind fortsprungen, and it basically means like you ran away, or your abgangene is the closest to apostate, like literally.
Is it like dissenter?
Something similar to that. I don't want to say for sure because I can't translate it exactly.
Right. I understand.
But yes, they have words for us. They have labels for us too. And as far as us believing or us being led astray, we're being led astray by Satan.
Oh yeah. And so
Absolutely.
am I.
Absolutely.
You could think of like a puppet master with his little strings, controlling the puppet's arms and legs and everything. And here I am. I'm being controlled by Satan here.
Yep. Yep. So James and I have been putting out these stories, and that's been really interesting because there's been some significant pushback from the ex-Amish community that is like really interesting. And I'm like, well, here's the other part of it. There's been some wonderful people who have shared their own stories of how they left this church and, now they're having, because of these recordings, they're having wonderful conversations with their own children. And
Hmm.
that to me is worth it. It's worth it.
So when we first started talking about our conversation off air, we said we were going to call this tattoos and therapy.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't have too much more time that we can stay on. So let's talk about our tattoos real quick, and let's show them off a little bit,
Show them
if
off
you're
a little
willing.
bit. So this is one of my favorite ever tattoos. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it says shunned because that's what they did to me. The thing in the center, that is an Amish covering that is on flames because I actually burned my Amish covering, and the covering that I wore to church on Sundays was black
Nice,
because I was unmarried, and I burned that one.
nice.
Beautiful cleansing fire, and
So
I have no regrets.
did you have to wear a certain color head covering because you were unmarried?
Yes,
Oh, that's something new to me too.
yes.
See, there's a whole lot of nuance I have no clue about when it comes to that.
So that was my unmarried head covering.
Okay.
That's it.
So
You
that's
have
for
to.
every woman in the Amish.
It depends really what you're doing. So like during the week, we would wear a white one, but when we went to church or a formal event like a funeral or like a wedding, we would have to wear our unmarried head covering, and that one was black.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So here, I'll show
And
off mine real quick for viewers.
I still just love that.
Oh, too much
I
on
love
my
that.
keep on pump. So this is a phoenix breaking the chains. So basically starting a new life and getting away from the cult indoctrination and being free and being who I am.
That's amazing. So how do you get there?
Get to where the point of breaking free.
To being you?
To being you, it's a lot of self-discovery. You try things and you keep trying things. If you don't like it, you don't do it. If you like it, then you can start incorporating it. It's just, it's a lot of self-inflection, thinking about it, trying to see who you are as a person away from what you were raised with. It's like I mentioned earlier, I got the LGBTQ flag behind me, and they demonize LGBTQ from where I come from as well. And even though I don't consider myself part of that, my thoughts about who those types of people are have definitely changed, especially when I've talked to them and really got to know some and see it's not just something you can turn on and off like a light switch like they tell you can. No more so than I can tell you why I like chocolate cake better than vanilla cake.
I mean, can you tell me why you like women and not men? Exactly.
Well,
It's
I mean,
just like
I
that.
can, but it's a little bit too risque for the channel.
There you go. Uh, so it's beautiful to see people being who they really are. That is beautiful. And also embracing themselves and then learning to love who they are. It's really
Exactly.
important. Another thing is when you do that, oftentimes I see people expand their horizons. So real quick, I'm working on a support group for survivors right now through my organization. And I'm
Awesome.
also working on a terminology list that's going to be put out in flyers for plain people to be put around communities where they live. And let me talk about therapy. Okay. So, y'all probably didn't see it, but I have scars all over my body because I've always been a fighter. And I have scars from being abused. Many, many, many years ago, probably about 15 years ago, maybe even 16, I went to see a therapist, new therapist, because I had just moved. And I walked in. I think it was the second time I went to see her, or the first time. It was one of those times. And so I'm talking to this therapist, and this therapist says, I won't work with you unless you admit that you're self harming. Number one, those were not scars from self harming. Number two, that was a huge assumption on her part after I get done spilling my guts about the abuse that I went through for where I was, yeah.
Yeah.
And for you to say that, that was very unethical as a therapist. You should not be saying that to people,
No, you shouldn't be. Now,
period.
was this therapist a religious person by chance?
I do not know.
And the only reason I asked that is because I listened to a lot of the broadcast from the atheist community of Austin, like Talk Heathen, Atheist Experience. I don't know if you know those shows or not. But one of the big things they promote is they have what's called the Secular Therapy Project. And these are
Yes.
therapists that are vetted by a secular therapist himself,
Awesome.
Dr. Daryl Ray, and they have to go through a process to know that these people who sign up to be part of this project, these therapists, aren't going to be forcing religious issues down people's throat, trying to tell them, well, you're not praying enough, or you're not close enough to God, or whatever the case may
Or you
be.
just have to pray harder, or you
Right.
don't really have faith, and that's why this continues to
The
happen
goal is
to
to
you.
have
Yeah.
really science-based therapy to help people recover from their issues, and not this pseudoscience religious bullshit that some of them try to push.
Right. So, my tattoos. So I have these tattoos on my forearms where those same scars are, where the therapist was like, those are self-harming scars and you have to admit to it or I won't work with you. I got really lucky because I actually did not go back to that therapist.
That's
I've
good.
also had therapists who told me that I'm only gay because I have mommy issues, or yes,
Yeah,
very unethical.
very
Nope,
unethical.
nope.
Very that's a big red. And the problem is when you're going into a therapist and you don't know anything about them at those initial stages, those therapists are causing more harm to you than they are
Yes.
helping you. And the problem is you're seeing a therapist thinking, hey, these people know what they're talking about, when they're full of shit, and you need to find your way out.
Yep.
And I I don't know if you have this in your works or not, but it would be very important to have those red flags for therapists to be put out there, so that way people know what to look for walking in to see a new therapist.
I actually have a list of things for people to look for. Basically, I plan on publishing this sometime this year, but it's a list of things that I interview my potential therapists.
Good, good, good.
I have a series of questions that I ask, and at each step of the way, if they answer it in a wrong way, I either ask clarifying questions, or if it's a deal breaker, I just walk out. I'm done. I refuse to go see a therapist that doesn't look at me as a human being, because I've also had therapists who look at me as an anomaly, and it's like almost like I'm a animal in the zoo.
Yeah.
And
N-
that's not cool either,
No, it's not.
because they forget that you're a human.
Yep,
You're not just a research project.
exactly. And that's good that you have that. And Hopefully, what I'll do is if whatever links you have that you want me to add to the description, please send those to me, and I will definitely put them in the description. I'll also be happy to put them on some of the Facebook groups and stuff that I'm in as well, so that way we can get these promoted out there a little bit more. But that's really all the time I have for today. So,
That's okay.
because I work nights and I got to go start packing my lunch to get ready to leave here
Oh my
soon.
goodness.
Yeah.
So hopefully you have fun at work.
Well, I hope I do too, but we'll see.
It's just another day. Have you seen The
Or night.
Handmaid's Tale?
Huh? No,
you
I
seen it?
haven't. Well, I've seen a few episodes, and it's
Uh,
on my list of things to watch. So,
Let me just say this. I started watching The Handmaid's Tale, and I am dying laughing at some of these things because I feel like I lived this already as a child.
and my wife keeps telling me, "You gotta watch it. You gotta watch it," because she's seen it all
This
herself.
is why.
And yeah, yeah, and
It
I
might
know
help you understand a few things.
yeah, and like I said, it's on my list of things to watch. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, thank you, Mary, for coming onto my channel today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
And hopefully we can do something else in the future. And if you want, I mean, if I'm that boring, just tell me now.
Well, see, here's my thing is I have, about the support group that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
I have the pamphlets I'm working on,
Mm-hmm.
and I have the other part that I'm working on, like the therapist portion. So I have like these three major projects. Oh, and someday I might have a book published. Maybe.
Oh, nice.
Maybe.
Well, definitely keep us informed of that, and make
Yeah.
sure we can get that out there, because these issues are very important, and people need to, like we said, need to be made aware of what's going on inside all of these groups. So thank you.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
Do Jehovah's Witnesses, they have books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Lots of
we can
books.
get together offline and compare some of the notes in the books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can definitely do that. That would be interesting to see. We're probably going to find a lot of similarities and just be blown away by it.
Yep. Sad but true story.
Yeah.
It'd be really, yeah. But you got to go. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
No, you're
I keep
fine.
coming up with more stuff for you.
Well, hey, listen, just whatever other ideas or stuff you have, just message me.
Okay.
So,
Sounds
and
fantastic.
we'll keep in touch. So, viewers, I want to thank you for dealing with our end of the video rant here. and for tuning in. And please, if you haven't, subscribe to the channel, and also subscribe to Mary's channel. Her links will be in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.